Hello students, welcome to Studies in Theatre MOOC course. I'm going to discuss something very significant. I'm sure many of you are postgraduate students, many of you are research students, many of you are freelancers who wish to write about theatre, who wish to continue some research in theatre. So in my discussion of various facets of theatre in different lectures, I have covered little bit of everything, and I'm sure there is so much more left to be discovered and discussed, which is now your responsibility. But I wanted to touch upon the topic that is research in theatre studies because uh, this course looks at making you a holistically trained person in theatre studies. So where on one hand you have got to know on how to handle lights in theatre, you have to also know how to write about theatre. Because there is always this gap between practitioners and the scholars in theatre spaces and performance world. So how to go about it? The first and foremost is that theatre and scholarship have to be looked at as two fields of which you have to create an intersection. And that represents a dynamic convergence of artistic expression, academic inquiry, and this makes a very interesting tapestry where practices intertwine with the intellectual questioning. This symbiotic relationship, therefore, is for deeper understanding of human experience. So, your role as a research scholar or researcher in theatre studies is enhancing the role of an artist, enhancing the persona of an artist, because you are also serving the cultural identity and you are also writing about the social dynamics of a performance tradition. So as a researcher in theatre, one has to bridge the artistic expression with academic inquiry. Because theatre serves as a powerful medium for storytelling, character exploration and emotional responses. And scholarly inquiry, we dissect all the artistic elements, uncover them, unravel them, the themes underlying, and provide historical context, cultural context, influences about all those things. So the this contextualizing of theatrical practices with academic discourse is very important for a research scholar, because scholarship provides a framework for contextualizing the theatre practice that you want to study about. You give it a historical, socio-political, or any other theoretical context. And this analysis also leads to the analysis of performance, text, production techniques. Scholars provide various kinds of significations to different aspects of theatre. So research in theatre also involves examining the theoretical perspectives and the methodologies of theatre practice, which leads to understanding from post-colonial theory to feminist analysis and postmodern intervention. You can employ so many lenses to deconstruct the theatrical performance, to dissect the performance text and the cultural phenomena that theatre is. And one also needs to examine its interdisciplinary dialogue that is inherent in the spirit of theatre as a theatre scholar, because it thrives on interdisciplinary dialogue, theatre. It draws insights from fields such as anthropology. So as a scholar, we can bring in that anthropology, sociology, literature, psychology, different kinds of visual arts. So there can be collaboration also in our work as scholars, because we enrich the understanding of theatre as a multifaceted art form. It reflects the shapes and hues of human experience in totality. A scholar in theatre, a scholar of theatre, a researcher in theatre nurtures critical thinking. The research also nurtures the critical thinking of that scholar, but it is important to know of the critical and creative inquiry and critical thinking, because theatre and scholarship cultivates both. Through research, analysis, interpretation, and scholarly challenges that come across, you are going to subvert the assumptions. You are going to explore new perspectives and leading to the dialogue that is around the theatre as some kind of role model in society. So, the theatre research advances the knowledge and innovation of scholars, and they also contribute to the advancement of knowledge and innovation about theatre that exists. Whether it can be historical research, whether it can be performance analysis or technological experimentation, these can work as creative. They can fuel the creativity. They can push the boundaries of theatrical practice. And then, how it leads to the how your work as a researcher, uh, in totality, theatre scholarship leads to promotion of social awareness about theatre, advocacy of theatre, because it talks about the issues like injustice, inequality, cultural diversity that is visible in different facets of theatre practice. So, by writing about them, scholars amplify the different kinds of voices of marginalized people, the challenges that are dominant, the dominant narratives are subverted, challenged, and social change is also sought by the research, through research. So, the research in theatre, therefore, not only enhances your understanding of the arts, it also illuminates historical, cultural, and social contexts. And you have to have various various modules in your research structure, and this presentation is carrying it forward. So, what are the objectives of theatre research? The first is that it understands the history and evolution of theatre, wherein it seeks to look at the development, tracing it back to when it began, how it takes shape, how it took shape, and how the different traditions, different kinds of movements influenced it through in different time zones, different time frames of history, and how it navigated through cultural advancement and evolution. So this is one objective. Then it also analyzes the various theatrical forms and genres. This is another field of research, another objective for theatrical research, wherein the researchers are looking to understand the stylistic, thematic, and structural characteristics of different genres of theatre, like experimental theatre, classical theatre, modern theatre, post-colonial theatre, postmodern theatre. Then one more dimension is to explore the cultural and social implications of theatre, where you can examine how theatrical productions reflect and shape the cultural norms of a society, how they create narratives of identities, how they form the value systems. Then theatre research also investigate the intersection of theatre with other disciplines, like I already told you. So these different aspects. Then there are two methods of research in theatre studies. One is qualitative research methods, where you are taking forward the ethnography, means immersive fieldwork to study the cultural context and practices of theatre communities. When you talk about life and achievements, hardships, innovations by artists or communities of artists, that is ethnographic research. And for that, one has to interview in-depth conversations with people, with practitioners, living with them, going in field, spending time with them, have insights into their methodology, look at their life's perspective. Then participant observation is also a method where what do? You observe how theatrical events are done, how the entire dynamics are created, how people interact with each other in the space of theater production, how the whole process come into shape, what are the nuances, what are the highs and lows of the entire process. Then there is quantitative research methods where you conduct surveys to solicit systematic data, have collection of data through questionnaires, and you then quantify the opinions, attitudes, belief systems, preferences, values and faith, likes and dislikes. And this statistical analysis of data leads to identify patterns, correlations, trends, and then reach upon the findings to for the framework of new kinds of policies and other things. In addition to this, there is textual analysis, close examination of scripts, performances, and other textual resources to interpret the meaning and symbolism. And performance analysis, like one has to sit through the performances in real time, watch them. And if that is not accessible, I think there is no harm in even watching the videos of the performances. Although one should always try to watch a real time performance. But sometimes we are researching about something of which no performances take place. So the technical, aesthetic and communicative aspects of theatrical performances are analyzed in this manner. So what can be the sources of your data? From where? First is primary sources. The primary sources include the scripts, original texts of plays and performances. You see how important they are. And in our part of the world and similar situations wherever they exist in the world, scripts are not kept with care. We do not find them documented in archives. So I was talking to you about digital intervention, and at that moment I had suggested that it is a very important thing through which we can safeguard a lot of properties related to theatre. We can document and we can safeguard them. Very few of original texts of plays have survived, especially in our country. If you go to other countries, developed countries, and look at their archives, you will understand what I am saying. And then the recordings of the performances, as I said, the audiovisual documentation of live productions. That is also a resource for us. Then reviews written by renowned people, writers, critics. See, I have covered that in this lecture also, in this discussion, in this course, that I have told you how to write reviews, because reviews are a very important resource for future generations to know about a particular play. So many of English playwrights that we are studying and we teach, we know about their work, how it was received, only because of the reviews that were published. So critical assessments of analyses of these works is one another source. Then there is a set of secondary sources. What is that? The academic journals, scholarly articles and research papers on theatre related topics. You can always access those journals that are published dedicated to the theatre research. Books that includes monographs, anthologies and reference works which provide you very detailed insights, profound inquiries into the history of theatre, theory and practice. And of course, the last one is the online database, which is the most recent addition to the resource for the researchers in theatre and of course in so many other fields, and we are also making use of it. So what are the areas of research? History of theatre, performance studies, dramaturgy, theatre and social change, theatre and identity, theatre and politics. Well, you can add more points to this list, but you will find that only some kind of subtopics will be there in addition to what is happening here. So, in addition to what is provided in this list, you can see that this list can be diversified into various kinds of topics by using a combination and permutation of so many things. Like for example, history of theatre and politics, theatre of politics can be put together. Similarly, dramaturgy and social change can be put together. The issue of identity can transform into or diversify into so many topics. So, as using as umbrella term, these are some areas, but it's such a vast field that you can bring in economic perspective, you can bring in political perspective, you can bring in commercial perspective, you can bring in protest perspective, you can bring in so many other perspectives to study in the areas of theatre research, gender studies, then environmental studies, then digital humanities can also be used as a platform where you can study theatre research and continue with theatre research. Then what we see therefore are, look at these case studies for example. I'm just narrating you a couple of case studies which refer to the different kinds of topics for it. The Wooster Group's production of Hamlet. This particular research was about the innovative staging and performance techniques employed by the Wooster Group, which was a renowned experimental theatre company in the production of Shakespeare's Hamlet. And this research explores how the company reinterpreted the classic play by multimedia integration, physical theatre and deconstructive approaches. And therefore, the research sheds light on the intersection of traditional text and contemporary performance practices. Another example is, for example, the title is The Impact of Site-Specific Theatre on Audience Experience. This study investigates the transformative effect of site-specific theatre on audience engagement and the perception of the audience. So this research was about how the play is staged in an uncontrolled location, such as like an abandoned warehouse or a public park. The study examines how the site's physical and environmental characteristic influence on the audience's immersive experience and the spatial awareness, the sensibility around it and the responses about the performance. Another interesting example is the representation of gender in contemporary musical theatre. Can you see how different variety of topics can be brought together to have such innovative research topics? This particular research portrays gender roles and identities in the contemporary musical theatre productions. It talks generally about Broadway or the West End shows from recent years, and it analyzes how characters, narratives and musical compositions they contribute to the representation and subversion of different gender norms, stereotypes and the power games, power dynamics within the genre. Such a fascinating topic, isn't it? You can also go ahead and write about such kinds of things about the world that you are living in. Then why not activism? Like the use of puppetry in political theatre activism. Imagine this topic. It examines that as puppetry has as a form of artistic expression can also work as political activism in today's theatre. And it draws on examples of puppet productions staged in response to social injustices or political movements. So this paper, this research, goes into analyzing how puppetry techniques, symbolism, and visual storytelling are employed to engage the audience, to raise awareness, to spread the message, to disseminate the agenda, and also to mobilize the collective action of people for a certain cause. Another example is adaptation of classical texts in contemporary theatre. Here, Greek tragedies or Shakespearean plays in contemporary theatre productions were uh, looked at as the reinterpretations, because there was a focus on specific adaptation, the series, and how directors, playwrights, and performers have reinterpretation of something which appeared timeless. And of course, his plays are timeless. And that is why they are inspiring the researches of very modern nature as well. Then another example is, looking at the dance theater from the perspective of choreographers. So many topics are there. You can go on and on about these kinds of things. As far as my own research is concerned, I have worked on Nautanki. I have worked on female actors in Nautanki, in Swang. I have written plays about the research papers on therapeutic work of impact of plays and things like that. Then I've also researched on how theatre can be used to teach different kinds of language aspects in English classrooms, in cultural classrooms, and then I've also written papers on different kinds of activisms that are involved in theatre, and theatre becomes a medium to express that, about protest theatre, about readers theatre, amateur theatre. So all these things are there for you to explore on your own also. So there are challenges in theatre research, and I can say this with personal experience. I can also say this with my exposure to so many different kinds of people across the world, that yes, theatre research is a challenging business if you are really committed to doing some kind of real and genuine original work. Because access to resources in countries like ours, in situations like ours, is the biggest challenge. And students are often seen hopeless when people tell them that if you have not watched a performance, you cannot do something about theatre. I would like to tell you that it's not the end of the world. If you have decided to be a theatre scholar, then nothing is available, and if a video is available, then that video is itself a resource. It's better to depend on that video and progress further into the world of theatre research rather than giving it up altogether because a live performance could not be watched by you, because you live in a small town or a so-called small town or some interior of any part of the world where theatre culture is not there, where plays are not held. I belong to Aligarh. I live in Aligarh. I work in Aligarh Muslim University. It does not have theatre culture. Yet I am dedicated to theatre culture, theatre research, and I have felt a lot of marginalization from the mainstream cities, mainstream academic spaces, which benefit a lot from the international correlations, because people are more accessible, they can go to these places, and people like us do not have that access. But still I have continued doing it, and I'm happy about what choices I made, because we need to overpower those. We need to be ready for those challenges and fight them back in our own way. Ethical considerations are crucial, because if you are a researcher and if you don't know how to respect the boundaries of privacy, recording, where can I keep my camera, to what extent I can use without acknowledging, how to quote properly. These ethical considerations are important, and a lot of performance culture is full of those kinds of information which people generally do not bother to attribute to. They do not know who has done it, and they don't want to know it. And many times we appropriate it with ourselves, with our names, and that is wrong. So have ethical considerations in this. It is interdisciplinary nature. You need to master at least 2-3 fields of which you are going to create a collaboration in your research. You cannot just simply sit in front of a performance or hold a drama book and just keep paraphrasing it or analyzing it that this is good or that is bad, this is good, that is bad. You will have to create a perspective. You will have to bring in some kind of disciplinarity of other world in order to give it a fresh perspectives. Otherwise, it will sound like a repackaging of something that already exists. And then subjectivity analysis. We can always be partial, biased, and prejudiced while talking about something. For example, saying that I love this kind of performance. I love to watch this play. I love that playwright. It is a very innocuous expression. It is very harmless, but it is not something that is advisable in research. One has to be a person who has no such likes and dislikes to express, especially in the paraphernalia of research. So think of how you can manage these things to be possible in your research, and then go ahead. Don't stop yourself. It is something that is very much required. Good researchers in the world of theatre, especially in India, are very much required. Our country has so much to offer to the world. It has to share a lot to the world. And that needs right kind of research scholars, writers, enthusiasts to be talking about it, portraying it in right perspective without appropriating it or museumizing it or creating caricatures out of it and benefits out of it for their professional growth only. So that is something that I urge you and request you to carry forward for. So this is my summation about it. In future directions, incorporation of technology in theatre research is going to be there. More and more globalization of theatre as a field of studies is to be visible. You have to be ready for it. It is already happening so fast, and a lot of emerging areas of interest have to be kept an eye on. That's what makes you a research scholar, a researcher in theatre studies. So this is all that I have to say. I hope I have been able to give you some glimpse of what are these areas. So don't think that this is some kind of impregnable wall. It is something that you need to begin with small, honest little steps in the right direction, and the time for that is now. All right. I hope you have enjoyed this discussion. See you in my different lecture. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.